How was your meeting the other day, Tracy?
Sorry, my volume was off. I didn't hear the beginning of that. Sorry, Sean.
That's all right. How was your meeting the other day when you did your event?
Went really well, thank you. It was a launch of Sheffield's decarbonisation route map for those of us that don't know. With the council, really good. Some very positive feedback on LinkedIn and things. So it's gone well. Thank you for asking, Sean.
It's all right.
Are we expecting many more, Sean? Do you know?
I think I'll just give it until a couple minutes past and then I'll make a start.
Super.
That's okay. There's a few that's accepted that's not joined yet. Go on then, Carrie. I think we should make a start.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm happy for people to join as and when they manage to log on. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Carrie Sudbury, Chief Executive of the Barnsley and Rotherham Chamber of Commerce. And firstly, may I apologise, a few tech issues this morning. My camera doesn't seem to be wanting to work today. So you've got my little thumbnail of my press headshot. So forgive me for that. But it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar this morning. Thank you for attending. We'll be looking at the results from the latest quarterly economic survey for South Yorkshire, as you're very well aware. This quarter particularly focuses on social value. For content, for context, for those who haven't necessarily attended one of these webinars before, the findings give us essentially valuable snapshots of the current business landscape, but more importantly, they help us to understand how organisations across the region are thinking about growth and resilience and essentially the wider impact on communities. Social value has become an increasingly important part of that conversation. We at Barnsley and Rotherham know that very well. We seem to be taking and tackling that conversation head on, certainly within Rotherham. It's about how businesses contribute beyond pure economic performance, if that makes sense, whether it's through creating opportunities or supporting local supply chain. That's something that we are particularly invested in, investing in people or strengthening places that we all live and work in. So today's an opportunity not just to hear the data and to understand it and to number crunch essentially, but it's to reflect on what it means in practice and to share perspectives on how we can continue to build a more inclusive South Yorkshire and its economy. So enough from me and enough from my little headshot. Once again, thank you for being here today. We really do appreciate your input and support on this data and what essentially we do next with it. So I hope you find the discussion insightful and useful. So Sean, if I may be able to hand over to you to get us started. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, and I'll crack on with the data. So I think just a bit of housekeeping stuff. Feel free to stick your hand up if you want to ask anything or put any questions in the chat. And you might want to kind of have a think about what you might want to ask our two panelists later on in the session, and we'll be done and dusted in an hour. So on to the results. Yeah, so we had just over 350 respondents from across South Yorkshire, and I've put that it's pretty much reflective of our general membership base on the whole. And I'll go into the hot topic part first. So the Quarterly Economic Survey has a series of standard questions that we ask every quarter, although I know it probably feels a little bit more than that. And they join the national data set that we supply to the British Chambers of Commerce as well. So it's the largest business sentiment survey in the country. But we in South Yorkshire, we do like a bit of a hot topic as well, just that might be responding to, as Carrie was saying, any kind of emerging themes or things we might want to know that might be useful for our broader work across South Yorkshire. So this one's on social value. So, yeah, I mean, businesses engaging in social activities, they were most likely to support schools and charities, as well as participate in local hiring and procurement. Businesses taking part in the social value survey were mostly involved in engaging in that kind of hyper-local stuff and less well-versed in, for example, targeting particular disadvantaged people or those furthest from the labour market. Overall, businesses felt quite confident in communicating their impact in social value. Very confident or somewhat confident, I'll just admit Peter. So I think for most respondents, they felt that the benefits were workforce related. So around 2/3 thought that the workforce related benefits were playing a significant role in their business. So undertaking activities to support staff and wellbeing came next, and improving and maintaining recruitment and retention. In comparison, there were fewer businesses that were engaging in social value to enhance business performance, and only around 2/5 that were engaging to increase productivity and value to tenders, which did surprise me actually, just because we have loads of discussions around procurement and social value comes up again and again and again on winning those bigger contracts, but you know, didn't seem that much of a motivator for businesses, which I thought was a little bit unusual, and might be something that we reflect on in a little bit. In terms of the constraints and the barriers, so businesses were more likely to report that they had an importance of social value if they had increased that within the last year in their organisation. And I think whereas 36% said that they had the ability to prioritise it in their business. So the gap suggests that businesses are faced with barriers to fully engaging in social value activities. And the most significant obstacles were financial and time constraints, no surprises there, and each of those affected more than half of the respondents. Additionally, there was a quarter of businesses that highlighted difficulties in measuring and evidencing social impact, as well as uncertainty around what social value actually meant as opposed to CSR, for example, which we might get into the weeds of when we have the discussion. Cool, right, so the next few slides, they're on the general economic conditions in South Yorkshire, and I do need to sort of kind of say up front that the field work for this research was between the beginning of February and the beginning of March, and so that was prior to the US-Iran conflict, and so you know, obviously we need to take these results with a pinch of salt, and the upcoming QES results might be different again. I think it's also worth saying that the previous quarter's results, as you'll see in the slides, were disastrous. You know, there was probably some of the most depressing metrics that we've had for some time. So on that buoyant note, I'll just whiz through some of these. So in terms of UK sales, I think while sales growth has returned to the long-term average, I think what we're actually seeing is a bit of a rebound and not anything that you could describe as growth, for example. And that's also reflected in those advanced orders. It's slightly over rebounds the results from Q3. And the percentage of businesses reporting increased sales returned to the long-term averages and growth in advance of domestic orders. So it's probably its strongest in over a year and a half, but you still couldn't describe it anywhere near optimistic signs of growth. In terms of overseas, it writes the previous quarter, which saw a significant decline, and that is the same pretty much as it is for the advanced overseas orders as well. Writes the results from the previous quarter almost exactly. In terms of workforce, so workforce growth has strengthened, but recruitment difficulties have eased. So if you look at this chart, so workforce growth has returned to those long-term average trends. And if we look at, the labour force, that stayed exactly the same. So the percentage of businesses who've attempted to recruit, there's been no change. In terms of businesses attempting to recruit, so recruitment activity has also strengthened across all job types, particularly for permanent roles. So that does signal an improved confidence. So the only thing that went up the previous quarter was more people recruiting temporary jobs, and that continues to be an upward trend. If you look at the, let me get my, can you see that? Little red pointer. Yeah, so that continues to be on an upward trend. So I mean, you could take that as a positive and a negative, but I mean, if you take that into account with like part-time and permanent as well as full-time, it all looks a little bit more encouraging, doesn't it? That said, so recruitment difficulties have eased. They do this sort of like up-down pattern for the last year, which just goes to show how the labour market responds to economic pressures and that those wider economic conditions. And that is seen on a quarter-by-quarter basis. You know, we're not seeing these gradual changes, and there is a dependency between businesses being able to invest and also the kind of wider economic outlook. No surprises. And then if you look at some of the sectors in which that have had difficulty in recruiting in the last 3 months, obviously they're all pointing in the right direction. Businesses have found it easier across all sectors to recruit, including manual, technical, professional, managerial, and clerical, and unskilled. So just looking ahead to what we are likely to see in quarter 2, although obviously, as I mentioned from the outset, that might change with the kind of more global outlook. But the expectation from this survey is that it is much more optimistic. So with a third expecting to expand their workforces in the next quarter, or experience no change. So that's looking good, and I think is probably one of the more buoyant areas of the chart. And the trouble is, I'm reluctant to say the words positive because I think it just feels so tone deaf at the moment from what I'm hearing from businesses about how challenging things are, and the wider geopolitical issues, and then how that's affecting inflation and the cost of living. But I mean, the graph's looking in the right direction anyway. In terms of cash flow, very little to report, but it is still in negative. And I think until we see this figure improving, we won't see an improvement on the upcoming figures around capacity to invest in plant and training. So on that note, investment intentions have showed very little improvement overall, particularly in plant and machinery, but also in capacity to invest in training. And I think, you know, that sort of stuff is the canary in the mine, because if you're not investing in new plant machinery, not only does that have, you know, your kind of supply chain implications, it means you're not innovating, you're not growing, and likewise on the investing in training. I just admit, Gary, investing in training. We know that we've got skills issues in South Yorkshire, and skills is one of the primary drivers of productivity as well. And so when we see pretty much no improvement, I mean, it is up 3%, but it's all fairly stagnant. And if you look at where we were, even in 2023, 24, it's quite pitiful, really. So just moving on to capacity. So I think because there's this slightly stronger demand in sales, that contributes then to this, quite high proportion of businesses operating at full capacity. It's the highest that it's been in the last 2 years. So as we see advanced orders go up, we see domestic sales and overseas sales increase. Go figure, it has a positive implication on capacity. And business confidence, I think this is probably the kind of most useful thing to take away is that it's again a rebound. So I wouldn't, if you were to take out last quarter's depressing set of readings, it's only a slight increase. So that's why I'm saying it's a rebound as opposed to a positive indication on confidence. But that applies actually to turnover and profitability as well, if I just skip through the other slides. Yeah, so same on profitability and turnover. No change in expectation in terms of costs to goods, prices to goods and services. That remains static, which I thought was interesting, given the fact that all of the other areas have seen kind of slightly more positive trends. That one has continued to flatline. That'd be interesting to see people's reflections on that. And then, yeah, I would say labour costs remain a significant source of upward pressure, and that's something, just in the chamber membership network we hear all the time. Businesses concerned about the Employment Rights Act, corporate taxation and inflation, business rates. I think whilst they have all come down in this last quarter from, what was a pretty steep increase on the previous quarter, they're still so high when you compare where they were kind of pre 2024. So, we are seeing probably the highest levels of concern about some of those other areas that we've seen for a long time. And that is also mirrored in those factors that were more of a concern than the last 3 months. And with the exception of competition. So we look at that quite closely because I think that actually also shows that businesses are bouncing back and being able to be more profitable and more competitive in themselves. So that, I would say, is a good indication if we're seeing businesses being more concerned about their peers and competition nationally and internationally. Cool. Okay, I'll pause for breath, and I just want to introduce our two panelists. I don't know how to take this clicker off. Is this off? Okay. Our two panelists for today. So I will spotlight, and I'll stop sharing my presentation. So I just want to invite Mark. Would you be able to introduce yourself first, if that's okay?
Do that all the time. So yeah, I'm Mark Bell. I'm the Social Value and Partnership Manager at Keymet Homes. Was originally brought in as Group CSR Director, but I've been recently seconded to do a partnership with Hull City Council, Strata Homes, Priority Space, and Home Group Housing Association under a consortium banner.
Thanks.
Many years in sort of social value, worked for local authority for 21 years, then run my own consultancy business. So yeah, been in this game a long time.
Oh, thank you for your time and joining us on the call, Mark. Jack, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I'm Jack Kidder, the responsible business manager for Henry Boot. For those who don't know Henry Boot, listed property business, headquartered in Sheffield, and work really closely with the Chamber Network, and also Mark as a fellow chair of the South Yorkshire Cornerstone Group, which I'm sure we'll come on to later.
Right. So yeah, we all know each other and we're all old friends. I just wanted, Mark, that I know we attend a lot of these roundtables and things together and hear a lot of insight from businesses. What's your reflections on this quarter's results?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see particularly in terms of the social value feedback, that sort of commitments to the community came above tendering, particularly because I think the social, you don't know a lot about social value. Social Value Act came in 2013. It was meant to be the sort of big, the sort of big panacea for the government to sort of bring businesses more close to communities, but didn't have a lot of teeth. So that's been strengthened recently, and I think probably for SME businesses in the region, the biggest impact is the recent New Procurement Act, which came out in October, because that means that local authorities, whilst they don't have to put a specific percentage or mandate social value, they have to use the social value framework. So there's likely to be more and more social value asks coming out from local authorities, public sector bodies, to SME partners across the region. So I think that might start to change as the sort of the teeth kicks in terms of the Act for SME businesses in the coming quarters. But I think, it's quite refreshing to see that community commitment come above that anyway, because businesses can, contribute to the betterment of our communities without necessarily A, financially costing them a fortune, and B, having to do it under a tender. So we are seeing now as well that within the tendering process, local authority partners are asking for evidence that you've previously done, not commitments that you are going to do. So I think for SME businesses that are already contributing to that as something that they particularly find passionate about, will only help them in the future because they'll already have a track record. I think the key is that how they then record that and make sure they've evidenced that. So I know Sam's got a hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam, because I know you've got to go in a bit.
Hi, Mark. Thank you. That was really interesting as well, Sian. Thanks for that. I was just wondering, I guess building on that, Mark, and perhaps this is going to be a bit of a controversial point, but a little bit skeptical about the social value portal as a means of kind of businesses engaging with local authorities and kind of, providing that middleman kind of procurement service, because that's a cost as well. So, yes, kind of coming from working in a business that had to apply for tenders for the public sector, but now working for Rotherham Council, kind of seen both sides. But interesting views on that.
The social value portal, I think, is an interesting one in terms of that they sort of jumped on the market and was probably the first to get into a huge number of local authorities. And because of I guess the staffing and pressure commitments on procurement teams, it was an easy win for them to build in the social value portal. I think a lot are turning away from that now, and I would also say, I think in the next 5 years we'll lose the term social value, and you'll hear a lot more around social impact, because I think a lot of people have got hung up by the monetary value of social value, which actually isn't real. It doesn't exist. It's just proxies that are based around an activity and a change in, an intervention. So someone's unemployed and then they, you help them get into a job. There's an obvious uplift, and that's been built into a proxy. But I think people got caught up in, and we were as guilty as that as anybody, in the construction industry, with jumping on how can we get more social value, how can we get bigger figures. And actually, over the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've moved away from that into more of what actually is the biggest impact that we can make with our investment, be that time, money, or staff contributions. So I think, it is an interesting one that businesses don't need to have a complicated social value platform. You can use a spreadsheet. It's simple as that. The key is collecting the evidence and actually measuring the impact in a way that's meaningful. I've been working with investors in community platform, which is, £100 for an SME business to sort of get. And actually, the benefits of that is that you contribute your commitment to a local charity, community group activity, and they give you an impact statement. So they do all the hard work and produce the evidence for you, and all you do is then have to present that back in a format that is suitable to your local authority partners or clients. So I think, again, there's a lot of platforms jumped on the bandwagon and trying to make a lot of money on the back of social value, but it's not, it helps, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. And I think local authorities on our side, we need to recognise that and think about, the issues that this survey is raising about cost, and think about our process, make sure it's clear and easy for businesses to just deliver good social impact. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, again, for a number of the local authorities, they're learning they're learning themselves, and particularly procurement teams, in terms of, what can they put in there? What is, they don't want to put people off from tendering, but equally they, how can they guide them? What can they showcase that will mean that localized issues are raised and hopefully addressed? So I think that's another big piece of work that is going forward.
Jack, you were nodding away to quite a lot of that, and I think, particularly this thing around what's on the horizon for social value. Did you want to come in on any of those points?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I agree with a lot of what was said. I think the results for me tell us two things, and there's a positive and a negative in here for me. I think the positive I see coming out of the results is it's a reaffirmation that we've got a very philanthropic, community-minded business network across our region, and we should be really proud of that, particularly through fairly volatile economic conditions. Our businesses have continued to give back. That's good. I think the difficulty is, and I think the negative that we've got to try and address, is that I think businesses are yet to commercialise what social value can do for them. And I think the results tell me that businesses are doing this because it's a nice thing to do rather than it's an economically driven thing to do. Now, that's okay to a point, but the problem with that is when conditions get tough, it becomes too easy to stop doing. And I think particularly for SMEs who've got so much pressure on their shoulders at the moment, it could quite quickly become something that's not justifiable. Where I think to kind of slightly veer off a little bit in terms of the future of social values, I think much like the rhetoric around climate change at the moment, it's got to be embedded into economic models for it to be sustainable. Now, the way you do that as a business, I think, is you have to change your perception from seeing this as another cost and another burden to an investment. And for us at Henry Boot, as an example, yes, we absolutely have commitments we have to deliver and evidence to our clients. But it's about looking at, in terms of that engagement, where is it strengthening your business or, addressing some of your challenges? So an obvious one for me here is around skills. We represent, both Mark and I sit in an industry that's got really significant skills gaps coming down the line, as does other industries in South Yorkshire, like manufacturing. Now, we also know the government's trying to get a whole load of people that are currently economically not in the workplace or inactive back into work. So I think if social value can help businesses drive more inclusive recruitment, it does two things. A, it tackles those skills gaps and gives us a more diverse, resilient talent pipeline. But actually, it also alleviates some of the burden on the public sector. And if we see some of that burden reduce, guess what? There's more public sector budget for the things we want the public sector to be doing, which is developing local infrastructure and supporting local communities through enhanced services, which is good for business. So I think we have to I think for social value impact to evolve and sustain, it's got to be looked at more commercially and embedded into existing systems rather than being the odd charity day going and working with the local school.
I mean, I fully agree with everything you've just said, Jack, and obviously I lead on the local skills improvement plan for South Yorkshire and know all too well that we're in a skills crisis in some of our major economic driving sectors. I suppose kind of drawing a line then between the economic conditions that you heard about and this idea of being able to invest and seeing social value as an investment. Well, businesses aren't investing in plant, they aren't investing in recruitment, and this is a volatile and quite ropey picture for businesses at the moment. How, and I think this about your local skills improvement plan, how can a business commit to employing more apprentices or supporting people further from the labour market or sending some of their middle managers on leadership courses when they're struggling to be confident about whether or not they can afford blue roll and light bulbs for the next 6 months? How do those things kind of all balance together?
So I think. Oh, sorry, Mark. Do you want to?
No, you go.
So I think what I would say in response to that, the beauty with social value is the most impactful social value or social impact you can generate doesn't need to cost you significant amounts of funds or resource. It's actually just thinking a bit differently. And so it's not kind of trying to fulfill metrics or dashing to do absolutely everything. I think it's looking at what you can control as a business and where it can create the most value for you. So using Henry Boot, we're a really good example of this. You know, we're a big business in the sense that we're listed and we work across the country, but we're not a significant headcount. We're about 360 people across the UK. So we're not a huge headcount, and we're also not a huge recruiter. So for us, it's just not going to be feasible to commit to creating tens and tens and tens of jobs and apprenticeships directly. Where we can have the best impact is through influencing our partners in our supply chain. And actually, for us to do that doesn't actually cost us any more money. It's all about how we're working with our partners. So for instance, if we're delivering a contract and the local authorities said, we want you to be creating 10 jobs, it's not just passing that down to the supply chain and saying, off you go. It's been thoughtful and saying, how can we tailor the ask of those jobs? How can we kind of look at the local skills landscape, look at the local challenging conditions for, you know, it might be young people who are not in education, employment or training, or it might be more vulnerable communities like care leavers. How can we create jobs for those where it will be most positively felt? And if you do that, two things happen. One, you attack those skills gaps and you make things better for your industry. But two, you're helping a public sector partner tackle a problem they've got. And for a business like Henry Boot that does a lot of work in the public sector, that means that reputationally, we're not only known as a company that delivers a really brilliant product, a building or a place that we've delivered, but actually we've also got our sleeves rolled up and stuck into a challenge that our partner's facing. So reputationally, it can only help you be a stronger, more attractive partner in the long term.
Mark, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, sometimes, and this probably comes from some of the local authorities in terms of their ask as well, it is around local labour, is around like apprentices, new jobs created, and that's right, that public investment goes into doing that. But actually, you can find ways. So we've actually run a project where we've actually saved money and had some amazing social value outcomes. So I got asked to go into Hull Prison a number of years ago to speak to some of the prisoners about coming out into the construction sector through a wood workshop that they'd got. And through that conversation, I'd realised that they were making loads of really interesting products whilst they were in there learning these skills. I went back to site and we got a skip full of waste pallets, which we paid £300 a skip to take away, and it goes and obviously gets it's crushed and burnt and whatever. So I just said to the prison, could you do anything with these pallets? And they was like, oh, amazing. So now we've got a process where all our waste wood from all our sites across the region go to the local prisons. We've just set up another workshop in Lindholm Prison. They now are making planters that go out to community groups that are working with NHS around green prescribing, so people with mental health, to grow their own produce. Tackles food poverty, tackles mental well-being. The social impact from that from us is, yes, we're saving money. We've got prisoners that are learning the joinery skills that are going to be useful for coming out to us in the future, and we're enhancing that with a number of workshops, and we've brought our supply chain in. But we've also got community benefits for people that are then struggling to sort of survive, where actually you can grow a lot of particularly healthy foods, for yourself for free. So the impact of that was, from a simple just ask, was amazing. And we're now looking at that nationally. We've got prisons across the country, doing hedgehog boxes for us, bird boxes, all sorts of stuff, just purely from recycling our waste material. So it doesn't have to be costly at all.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Mark. I mean, I guess just on thoughts from what a local authority could do. I mean, I guess initially it sounds like that's a really good private-led initiative, but if there was anything that a local authority could do to help coordinate partners, overcome kind of viability issues, if we've got grant funding for community projects, if we can just connect the dots, basically, I would think that's how a local authority could add value to that. I mean, wouldn't want to get in the way, but yeah, helping tie it all together.
I think
Absolutely.
I was just going to say, to come back on that, Sam, I think the opportunity here is for us all to think about social value in a different way. I think it's for businesses to see it, to try and take a more commercial view on it, that this is part of how we deliver work now. It's not a bolt on, it's not a nice to do. I think for local authorities, I think it's evolving that view that this is a really brilliant way to develop long-term strategic partnerships. And I think for the best relationships, and actually, really good example for us is the work that our kind of ex-construction business, HBC, now still doing in Rotherham on the markets. I think it's where you can build really strong relationships with the right services in the council. So if we're trying to create more jobs for vulnerable communities, the council has the expertise in the people that need that support and the right specialists to help us direct it. So it's just trying to kind of connect our willingness with your expertise for the benefit of not just communities, but the local economy as well. I think that's how we do that.
Yeah. And just again, in terms of that local authority partnership, and I think partnership across different organisations. So it's not just, a commercial business with a community group. It's about how we connect other like-minded businesses. The Cornerstone Group's a classic example of that. We're all in there because we've got SME businesses, we've got really micro businesses, but people are there because they're passionate about making that change. But I think, I did a really simple project. I found a local litter picking group near to our site. We were building a new site, got lots of lovely new houses, but people were just dropping litter on the public open spaces. So I found the local litter picking group, said, look, what do you need? They said, oh, we need some high vis vests, we need some more bags. Real simple ask. But what I did was I said, right, okay, but for every quarter that you come and pick on our new housing development, I'll put a £20 Amazon voucher in, just to recognise the fact that you're all out there in your own time doing an amazing job. Now, so that basically cost me £240 a year, but actually, well, not even that. But actually, the benefits are that when people come to buy on our estate and see it all nice and clean and tidy, we get more sales. So there's and Jack's right, you have to think about, we're not charities, businesses aren't charities. We have to think about what's our business benefits for actually engaging with community organisations. And yes, you can do things because it's nice to do. And the South Yorkshire Community Foundation are amazing. If you've got some funds, they'll make every penny stretch a million miles, and give you really good, robust feedback and reporting. So that's another benefit. But actually, in terms of, as a business, if you make a decision to filter that through your staff, so that everybody has a view and opinion about how they can contribute, it has a massive impact. We've got staff here that have come through the care system that want to give back to the care system. We've had staff who have come, through ex-offenders that, ex-veterans, ex-servicemen, veterans. So they want to get involved. They want to give back. It's just how we enable them, and that partnership through the local authority and the network of community organisations, I think, is crucial.
I'm mindful of the fact that these both your businesses are, you know, they're not massive, but they are of scale. They're large businesses. How does some of this translate to the world of SMEs? And I think, you know, there was a correlation between the size of organisation and how confident they felt, not necessarily engaging in that social value stuff, because like we judge our business awards every year, and I meet amazing businesses from all shapes and sizes. And I think, you know, your point, Jack, about how big-hearted the business community is, kind of does, in a way, I sometimes just want to send that message back up to central government and say, do you know, these are residents, they are, you know, community makers. I think some of it is about demonstrating that value. Is there more that you know, local authorities or partners can do to strengthen that with SMEs, or is it something they're just going to have to roll with the changes that come in?
I think there definitely is, and I'm really glad you've asked that question, because we know that if you look across South Yorkshire, an incredibly significant proportion of the business ecosystem here is SME, and they're at the heart of our business community. So I think probably what I would say is every business serves somebody, don't they? Whether that's a customer, whether it's a supplier, whether it's going upwards. And I think if I was an SME, you know, it'd be really easy to listen to me and Mark and go, well, that's great. We haven't got a dedicated person to do this for us. But you honestly don't need to. No. You don't need to do it all. You don't need to have every bell and whistle. What you need to do is look at where you can create the most positive impact and where that can be most beneficially felt by your customer. So thinking about Henry Boot as an example, if we're developing out a commercial development, and you know, it could be the smallest subcontractor, but if they're willing to go, look, we're up for doing taking on an apprentice, or we're up for working with you and the local authority to try and give a work experience placement to someone who's neat, that's music to our ears because it helps us. So I think sometimes it's not trying to do it all, it's just choosing one or two things that you can put your hand up and go, look, I'm up for doing that. I think the flip side of that then is what we as businesses asking for this, and local authorities asking for this, need to do to support them. And I think for SMEs, it's providing really simple, practical guidance on what to do. Most SMEs I talk to on this topic aren't at all against the idea. They're actually, more often than not, they're really willing. They just don't always know what to do. So I think it's just really simple, straightforward. This is what we would really help us, and this is how we can connect you into the right services to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tracy, fire away.
Hi, thank you both. It's been really interesting. One of the things I think we don't do in South Yorkshire, we talk about in Sheffield all the time, but I think it's the same across South Yorkshire, is we don't actually shout about the good stories and how we've made an impact and the benefits. So yeah, I think Jack's heard me say this virtually in every meeting we've been in recently. But it's actually that communication piece, and I think it's really hard sometimes for the local authorities and the council leader to do that, because the local press are on their backs all the time and we get to see the negative stories. But we need to find a way of maybe our anchor institutions working together with us as chambers, actually sharing those good news stories more, so the good gets seen more, and then they become the case studies and things people are talking about, and the SMEs see that way forward as well, and we all learn and benefit from one another.
And I totally agree, and it's about working out what inspires people, isn't it? We know that on the commercial angle, some people are going to be inspired by data and the numbers, and I don't think we can lose that. But actually, it's not what would get me out of bed. What gets me out of bed and doing this job is the kind of stories Mark's been telling. And, you know, when you watch someone that you've just gone that little extra mile for, then go on and succeed and thrive in the workplace, I can tell you that is the best feeling in the world. And if we want SMEs to engage with this, they're not just going to be engaged by numbers, they're going to be engaged by human stories. You know, we're all, you know, Henry Boot's 140 years old this year. We would never have got this far if we weren't linked in and embedded in the community in South Yorkshire. That's what's powered our business for 140 years. So again, going back to that, seeing it as an investment, it's not just seeing it as an economic investment, it's about seeing it as, if you invest in the people where you're from, guess what, you're going to be a successful business. Even in tough times, you'll be able to more easily navigate those challenges. But so I think in terms of the storytelling, Tracy, I think you're right, but I think that's on us to be sharing those stories and championing the region's message, not just the council, not just the mayoral authority. Because actually, you know, me and Mark are pretty privileged. We hear pretty amazing stories every week of stuff going on. We just don't shout about it enough.
Yeah, and I think the chamber as well, you know, the chamber partners have got a big opportunity here to sort of working with those SME businesses. I mean, through the chamber awards, I met Trio Recruitment, and you know, they're two people in an office set up recruitment business, but the amount of social activity they were doing absolutely blew my mind. You know, they were supporting young people in schools. They were, you know, supporting a local football team. You know, they were out engaging with young people that were neat. And yes, you could say argument is that they're trying to find future talent for businesses, and that's great. But actually, that's the whole point. They're a business trying to improve business by doing social good. And for me, that's the key where, you know, SME businesses have a massive part to play in this whole ecosystem. But it's about, we have given hour. So if everybody's really busy, if you're a manufacturing business and you think, how do I put my head above the parapet? Give an hour. That hour to speak to a young person that perhaps hasn't spoke to a business person, hasn't got that insight into a manufacturing business, but thinks I might be interested. That might change their life. That might change their career path. You know, so it can be small interventions. I did a mock interview and I interviewed 10 candidates a couple of weeks ago. And there was a young girl that absolutely blitzed everybody out of the water. She was, score-wise, was fantastic. And at the end, I said, "Oh, what's your career path?" And she said, "Oh, I want to be an architect." Now, she didn't. There was not pre-planned. They weren't all construction. They were just random kids sat talking to me. I invited her down to our office, and now we're looking at seeing whether we can get her on a T level because she's just absolutely amazing. So there's some real business benefits to just stepping out and taking a little bit of time to do something.
I think just to add to that really quickly as well, not only is there a business opportunity here, there's a regional opportunity. And I know the chambers have played a massive role in this, but I've seen over the last 2 or 3 years more and more national government pilots, initiatives been run in South Yorkshire, because guess what? We're really good at rolling our sleeves up and trying things. And actually, you know, one of the nice bits about my job is I get to work across the country, and I'm able to take some of the brilliant innovation we've done in South Yorkshire to other parts of the country, and people are impressed by what we do. So I do think here that investing that time, particularly in that kind of next generation of talent, will absolutely pay dividends for businesses in this region. And it will mean, look, the thing is, I think businesses can't control some of that macroeconomic challenge. We can't control the impacts of the Iranian conflict. We can't control some of the impacts of you know, the major economic issues, but we can control how we operate at a local level and how we do right by the community. And I think that will help us stay resilient when the going gets tough. And when the going's good, it'll help us continue to be successful.
Yeah, 100%, Jack.
So
Sorry,
just
Mark,
to
go
finish,
ahead.
if anybody, if any business, any of the SME businesses on the call today want to know more about social value, want to know more about how they can get involved, you know, Sean, happily share my email, and I'm sure Jack's the same. Reach out, ask the question. We are privileged because we get employed to do this for a living. I accept that a lot of SME businesses don't have that expertise, but I will support any businesses in the region that want to work out there and do good.
Thank you, Mark, and I'll circulate after this with a recording of the webinar, but also your contact details, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Jack, just coming back to, you know, what you were saying about South Yorkshire's niche in this, and I definitely agree, you know, the social value stuff is the thing we could do something about, isn't it? Whereas I think sometimes, yeah, with the economic condition questions, it all feels so externally influenced. Could you just give some examples of where South Yorkshire is really getting it right? And, you know, but also I'm quite mindful, is there more that we need to be doing? I mean that in quite a practical way. You know, do you think that there's something that maybe we're one step away from, you know, could be even better if?
Yes, there's a couple of really easy examples. Probably at the larger scale, you've got government initiatives like Pathways to Work, which is all around kind of getting more people back into work when they are unable to do so, either because of long-term inactivity or perhaps poor health. And some of the work that's come out of Barnsley in that work and now is extending across the region is honestly phenomenal. And other places in the UK are looking at South Yorkshire and going, how have you done that? So I think, being able to partner national government as the region that's the obvious go-to in terms of we'll give this a go, I think that only then helps national government see South Yorkshire as a place that's a good place to invest in. At a more local level here in Sheffield, I think Mark might have mentioned it already, but you've got the See It Be It education outreach programme, absolutely incredible programme that's trying to connect employers to students to develop that future workforce, and to kind of coin an Oliver Coppard phrase, trying to get young people to think, I'm going to stay near, but I'll go far in my career. I don't have to jump on the train to London to be paid well and have a good career. I think in terms of what we could do better, and this is on all of us, not just SMEs, not just businesses, not just local authorities, I think it's just more thoughtful partnering. It's looking at what are the challenges my partners are going through and how can I tap into that. So I think as businesses, like I say, even in the tough times, we are still thinking about, how do we have succession planning? How do we hire? How do we, where we can invest? It's trying to think beyond what's your immediate business need and think what might be the need of the region. So if I was an SME and I was thinking about recruiting, at the moment, I would be knocking on the doors of the local authority or the mayoral authority to go, how can I support those who might be furthest away from the job market and really need that support? And you know what? The payback does come. It really does. If recruitment isn't something you can do, there will be something else. I think it's, as Mark said, it could be as simple as giving an hour of your time, but there is payback, and it will come with reward.
I mean, just to follow on that, we've got the most successful release on temporary license prison in the country. So for those that don't know what Rottle is, so Hatfield prison is an open prison. So prisoners go out to work every day and come back to prison in the evening. So in the last 4 years of sentence, Mick at the prisons had some amazing results. We've got some big players in there like Next and Amazon, and we're working with them on a scheme. But those prisoners are so motivated because they don't want to go back in when they finish. They want a job. And some of them have progressed through already into supervisory roles even before they're released. Now, that's a really simple way. If you're looking to maybe tap into a workforce where there's no contractual commitment, so it's a try before you buy, if you like, because they're obviously still a prisoner. Now, it's not to be abused, but if you're looking to potentially recruit and think, okay, I might give a chance out there to somebody, speak to Hatfield, and they're an amazing, group of people, and you'll get. We've had some great prisoners come, and the commitment is huge in terms of staff retention. So.
And I'll pop in the chat a link to, we've got an event coming up in a couple of weeks to go and visit one of the prisons in Doncaster. And yeah, I went last year, and it's genuinely one of the most transformative experiences I've ever had. I think it proper challenges your preconceptions about what prison life is like. And the prisoners that we met on that day are entrepreneurial, courteous, kind, and we had some employers speak on a panel, and they were saying you wouldn't know which of our staff were on Rottle, which of them were ex-offenders, which of them were residents. So yeah, I actually think that's something that we do really well in South Yorkshire and has national significance. Just before we wrap up, are there any kind of final thoughts from yourself, Mark or Jack? Any takeaways that you want to leave us with in the last sort of 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think it's just to say social value as a kind of landscape, if you like, it can be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot you could do as a business. There's a lot that could be asked of you. Don't try and do it all. If you're an SME, don't let that put you off doing something. even if you just choose one thing that you think as a business you can do, whether that's giving time, creating a job, taking on an apprentice, or working with a local school, just doing that one first thing is a really strong, credible demonstration of your willingness to give back. But I promise you, it will give back to your business in a commercial way as well.
And I think because I wrote down prior to this from the survey, you're not a charity, you're a business. So think about actually what's important to you or your staff. Is that mental well-being? Is that youth offending? Is that so? What's important to you? What do you feel like you'd want to contribute to? And discuss that with your staff, and then find a theme and then work with that till you get to a point where then you can look and expand, as Jack said, onto something else.
Brill. Thank you, Mark and Jack. I really appreciate your time, and like I said, I'll share a little bit more detail how anyone can follow up after this
Please do.
call. But yeah, just thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. This is the last webinar in this series. Going forward, we'll be running the quarterly economic survey in a slightly different way, but we'll still be doing it and still be sharing that insight with yourselves. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and I will leave you to your sunny days.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.